there was nothing special about Travis Walton. He was a forestry worker, just a regular man, until one fateful night back in 1975, his life and the lives of his co-workers changed forever. On November 5th of that year, Travis Walton and his crew were working at the Apache Sitgreaves National Forest near Snowflake, Arizona. Alongside Travis and witness to the incredible event that occurred that night were Michael Rogers, Alan Dallas, John Goulet, Kenneth Peterson, Steve Pierce, and Dwayne Smith.
When you were a child, did either of your parents discuss UFOs or extraterrestrials?
Yes.
That answer is true.
In the midst of their truck journey home, the group allegedly spotted a saucer-shaped object hovering over the ground about 110 feet away on the road. As well as being visually striking, it was making a high-pitched buzz. Travis claims he felt compelled to leave the truck and approach the object, an impulse he still cannot explain to this day. When Travis reached the craft, he was suddenly hit with a beam of light that knocked him unconscious. The stunned workers were panicked and, not knowing what to do, decided to drive away. Minutes later, the crew decided to return to the site to try and help Travis if they could, but much to everyone's surprise, Travis Walton was gone. Travis awoke in a room he described as hospital-like, and he was being observed by 3 short, bold creatures. They had a basic humanoid form, but beyond the outline, any similarity to humans was absent. Their heads were disproportionately large for their small bodies, but their eyes were described by Travis as twice the size of a normal human, and they glistened like orbs. Travis jumped to his feet in a frenzy and grabbed a nearby object and wielded it toward the creatures. The aliens apparently froze and did not fight, instead backing away. What happened next was even more strange, if that's possible. Apparently 2 human beings entered the room and took Travis by the arm, leading him away. Travis was screaming and demanding answers, but the creatures, and even the humans, did not speak at any point. Travis was lifted onto a table and the 2 humans, one man and one woman, suddenly produced an object. It was a clear, soft plastic oxygen mask, but there were no cubes connected to it. However, there was a small black oval sphere attached. The female pressed the mask down over Travis's face, who understandably started to wrestle it away and struggle. However, he then described his body becoming limp and his vision started to fade. The next thing Travis knew, he was once again unconscious.
That was the most terrifying experience of my life. But when I tell this story and try to relate to people, I'm trying to communicate what I experienced and how utterly traumatic that was, and how it was so devastating. I was, on the verge of catatonic for weeks after it happened. But I don't want to relate this story in order to inspire fear, because I've had enough time to think about it that I think that it was unwarranted, that my reaction was just due to my ignorance of the situation. The fact that I was returned at all is pretty significant,
Do you believe that it is possible that your entire abduction experience may have been a hallucination?
No.
That answer is true.
Meanwhile, Travis's friends, with no other hope, drove into town and contacted the local sheriff. They explained what they had witnessed as best they could and told authorities that a flying saucer had taken their friend. In an effort to prove them wrong, the sheriff conducted a thorough search of the area, but there was no sign of Travis Walton. Arizona sheriffs searched for Travis with scent dogs and helicopters in the forest for the next 5 days. It is now known as the most extensive search in Arizona history. Travis's friends were all questioned and investigated, and authorities strongly consider the fact that they might be responsible for murder. With no other explanation, Mike Rogers and the rest of the crew stuck to their story. As far as they were concerned, they saw what they saw, and Travis was indeed abducted.
Immediately, though, this was all nonsense, and these guys murdered him, and even my oldest brother, he He didn't believe me. He thought they had killed me. What we were doing with the brush that we cut was piling it up. There were piles that were in the clearing so that the Forest Service could burn these piles, when the conditions were right, to reduce the fire danger in the woods. And my oldest brother was tearing those piles apart. He was certain that my body was under there.
Did you drink any alcoholic beverages on the day you were abducted by a UFO?
There's times I wish I could say that's what it all was. I just got too much. But no, I didn't have a drop.
That answer is true.
On November 10th, Travis reappeared just miles away from where he had been taken. He recounts that he woke up lying face down by the side of the road, witnessing the craft departing directly above him. Travis frantically ran to find help, stopping at a phone booth at the local gas station in Heber, Arizona, from which he contacted his family in the early morning, who, to his horror, informed him he had been missing for 5 days. Travis was of course rushed to a hospital that found him to be dehydrated and noticed a puncture wound on his right arm. The man had also lost 12 pounds and had grown 5 days worth of facial hair. Of course, the fantastical story was challenged, but an interesting and crucial part of the events was 5 of the 6 witnesses passed polygraph tests in the days Travis was away. The one who didn't, Alan Dallas, only failed because he walked out before the test was completed. He and Travis were not getting along at the time, and he felt as if the police were trying to pin Travis's disappearance on him. What about Travis himself? Well, he also passed a polygraph test upon his return, and medical records indicated no drugs were present in his system.
One of the psychiatrists who witnessed my regressive hypnosis concluded that I was telling the truth, but since he did not believe in UFOs, he had to come up with something to rationalize this in his opinion. So he claimed that I had a transitory psychosis and had a delusion that this occurred to me. What he didn't explain was how my 6 co-workers had the same delusion.
Interestingly, Travis Walton had a favourable view of the aliens upon his return, describing them as non-threatening and believing he had only been taken on board the craft to be revived after being accidentally hit by the beam of light. Very little is known as to what truly happened after Travis was struck by the beam of light. This portion of the story relies, of course, on Travis' memory. The entirety of the incredible experience was revealed as a result of regression hypnosis, conducted by Dr. James A. Harder. In the hypnosis room with Harder and Walton were 3 physicians and a psychiatrist. When discussing the case, Harder said, "Beyond any reasonable doubt, the evidence is as valid as any that would be accepted in an American criminal court." So where was Travis if he wasn't actually abducted? It is important to note that if Travis had been hiding or lost wandering in the forest as initially suspected, he would have likely frozen to death with ice cold temperatures reported. Travis's family and friends of course all maintained they had no contact with him. This could have been a lie, of course, but the circumstances of the story certainly don't seem to indicate a family hoax or a big prank by the friends. But just because it doesn't seem to come across that way, that doesn't mean it wasn't a big hoax or a prank. Skeptics have found issue with Travis's story, labelling it as a perfect example of a media circus and being exploited by Walton to make money. UFO researcher Philip Klass criticised the efficiency of the polygraph tests, calling them poorly administered and that Walton employed polygraphic countermeasures, such as holding his breath. Other skeptics have called the tests gross deception. Well-known science and skeptic writer Michael Shermer has called Walton's claims a case of the power of deception, and not only deception of others, but of himself.
Extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence. Travis's story is an extraordinary claim. The evidence is just his word.
The Geiger counter readings, the electromagnetic readings, that's physical evidence. You can't hold it in your hand, but the skeptical investigators made these assessments, and all the witnesses, that's evidence. Have you read my book?
Yeah, I just don't accept it. I think it's possible that you just made up the story. I hate to say it.
A cognitive psychologist, Susan Clancy, suggested that Walton was influenced by the NBC television movie the UFO incident, which was aired, coincidentally, 2 weeks before his own alleged abduction. The movie dramatised the famous claims of Betty and Barney Hill, and Clancy suggested that Walton's story shares similarities to that, and that his story was an attempt to become an instant celebrity. A more open take on the claim came from Dr. J. Allen Hynek, who is remembered for being the chief investigator and scientific advisor on UFOs for the US Air Force. In 1976, he was quoted as saying, "What I've always felt about this case, I divided into 2 parts. One is the first part involving all 7. They took lie detector tests and passed them. It fits a pattern. If this were the only case on record, then I would have to say, well, I couldn't possibly believe it. But at the Center for UFO Studies, now we have some 24 similar abduction cases now currently being studied. Something is going on." In 1978, Travis Walton wrote the book The Walton Experience, which became the basis for the 1993 film Fire in the Sky. Paramount Pictures decided Walton's account was too fuzzy and too similar to other televised close encounters, so they ordered screenwriter Tracy Torme to write a flashier, more provocative abduction story. The movie presents the aliens as far more imposing and menacing, and creates a much more horror-focused story. The movie is indeed very scary and well made, but perhaps added a certain sensationalism to the claim that wasn't needed. Walton has continually spoken out against the depiction of aliens in the movie, remarking of course that he was terrified, but it was now clear to him the experience he shared was not with beings who wanted to frighten or hurt him, and the opposite is shown in the movie. 30 years after the book's release, Travis Walton appeared on the Fox game show The Moment of Truth and was asked if he was in fact abducted by a UFO, to which he replied yes, and answered that the show declared to be false.
Were you abducted by a UFO on November 5th, 1975?
Yes.
That answer is false.
Believers have questioned whether the show simply brought Travis on to make him look stupid, and that the test was set up for him to fail. Skeptics have said this was the moment that Travis Walton was finally exposed as a liar for all the world to see. Over the years, Travis Walton has occasionally appeared at UFO conventions or on television. He sponsors his own UFO conference in Arizona called the Skyfire Summit. Some say he has clung on to this tall tale to propel himself to celebrity. Others say that while he believed this event happened, he was mistaken. But let's not forget that many, to this day, actually still believe the story of Travis Walton is the most convincing alien abduction case ever recorded.
All I can remember, is that we were talking in the woods one day, Travis and I. We were talking about creating a UFO hoax. Okay.
Yeah.
I don't know how the UFO got there. Okay. When I was driving the truck and he jumped out, it was all deliberate. It was all a staged thing. Okay.
Yeah.
And he ran up there, and there was something about the UFO not being real.
What you're saying is you and Travis together hoaxed this.
Yeah.
So what really happened to Travis Walton on that fateful night in 1975? Is the man a fraud, deluded, or maybe, just maybe, he was a real alien abductee?